I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
So Dubai is obviously a city that's enormous change has happened over the years, and often trends emerge elsewhere and they come here over time. And I think people who've been here in the last 2 decades will definitely say that the F&B industry has evolved a lot. We've just seen Michelin star restaurants been announced, and especially also in the coffee space, there's been so many localized, specialized coffee cafes grown up in Dubai over the last 10 years or so. And we're fortunate enough to have one of those really pioneers in the Dubai coffee story with the first roastery on the show today. If you like this episode, I would point you back to a couple of episodes that might be similar to this. There was Tom Arnold from Bull and Roo, from Tom and Serge. It was episode number 4, way back a couple of years ago. We also had Rafi on from Sippy, a coffee app. We had the founder of Brew Society. So there's similar podcast stories about these type of businesses as well, if you like that. And for today, enjoy the conversation. Good morning and welcome back to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week we have a very special guest, part of Dubai's entrepreneur and F&B industry, Matt TooGood. He is the co-founder of Raw Coffee. So they are the UAE's first roastery to offer 100% organic and fair trade coffee, zoning in on sustainability. They've cut out the use of plastic, water and chemicals in the production process. And you know, really focusing on the taste as well. So we're going to have a chat about the history of raw coffee, how it's set up, how it's grown over the years, and part of the Dubai story as well. The brewery industry in the market in Dubai, in the region, and plans for the future. Good morning, Matt.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for coming in. Nice to meet you in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a customer of Raw Coffee. I like your beverages. I like your really good food as well. So tell us a little bit about the history.
Well, Raw was the very first specialty coffee company in the Middle East. Started by my business partner, Kim, 15 years ago, a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah. 2007.
Yeah.
Summer, yeah.
Which was a completely different day. You know, we're just having a quick chat about how we've been here in Dubai for a long time. And back in the days when I arrived in town, there was no coffee. So, now we call ourselves pioneers, but we really were just a couple of fools who were just trying to find a coffee because we couldn't find one here.
Yeah.
And now look at the coffee industry here. It's huge.
It's exploded. Yeah. It's got really big.
Yeah.
So you're originally from New Zealand.
Yep.
And what was your background?
My background was actually electrical, IT. I was in IT sales. I worked for Telecom New Zealand before I came to Dubai. I came to Dubai because my wife is an air traffic controller. So she came here because she wanted to work at the world's busiest airport.
There we go.
And it wasn't a very busy airport back then. So, it was a change of industry for me because I just didn't want to repeat what I was doing. And coffee was something that I thought I knew a lot about. I thought I knew everything about coffee because I drank it all the time. Yeah. And in hindsight, we knew nothing. And we just jumped in with both feet trying to produce a product that we thought that there was no product available on the market at the level that we wanted to have. It's a long journey.
So you didn't know necessarily a lot about it, but you knew you had enough appreciation to know that there was a kind of a type of coffee that was missing in the market that you would have had in New Zealand.
Absolutely. So coffee is a product that's best consumed fresh. So when you roast the coffee, so when it's actually put through production, it's usually good for up to about 6 weeks after it's roasted. Some people say, after 3 weeks, it's no longer any good. Certain coffees last a little bit longer than others, but in general, it should be drunk as a fresh product. When you take the bean and you grind it, it should be consumed within 2 minutes because you're losing all this aroma and flavor and everything. So it is a fresh product. When I came to Dubai, there was only imported product, which generally had taken 3 months to get here. So according to those rules, it's already dead. And then it sat on a shelf for another 6 months. So it didn't give you what you expected. In New Zealand, there was a roastery every 300 feet and a coffee shop every 50 feet. And New Zealand's culture is very much about going for short visits to a cafe 3 or 4 times a day. So coming here and all of a sudden, something that was, a core part of my life has disappeared because it just wasn't available, became a bit of a shock. And then thinking, oh, okay, there's lots of expats here. Surely a lot of these guys are the same. And so Kim had started a roastery actually around this area in DIP because she had a cafe and she couldn't find fresh coffee. So she thought, well, I'll start a roastery. I'm really glad that she didn't know what she was getting herself into. Otherwise, Raw wouldn't exist today.
Why do you say that?
It's been tough. It's been 15 years, and it is a roller coaster. When you're a solo business owner, you don't have any choice. You have to get out of bed every morning and you have to go to work. There is no other choice, especially when you start to get a team around you. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but neither Kim or I took salaries for many years. Our partners supported us in that time, and that was an ability to take whatever we could earn, put it back into the business and keep growing it. We also, because we're in the industry wasn't an industry, we could make mistakes. So we were trying everything and doing everything that we possibly could, experimenting with the coffee, but experimenting and being a business in the Middle East and developing it, from, okay, how do I get permission to have a chimney in Alcuz? And you go down to the environmental department, fantastic people, but they didn't know the answer either because we were the first people to be asking that question. So, back in those days.
And you need a chimney to roast.
To roast the coffee,
yeah.
And of course, what was the impact on the environment when you roast coffee? What is the carbon emissions? So, we'd go and tap into people in Europe and find out, to get emissions reports. And, now today I have an emissions inspector who comes every 6 months and checks our emissions. So, the transition has been amazing. I don't know if I would do it again now. I loved what we did back then because it was all about, okay, what if we do this? That didn't work. Okay, what if we do that? Okay, that works. People like that. So, and Dubai back then was much, much more of a community feel because a coffee cafe or a coffee shop was the place that you shared information. Where do I go to get this? What do I do to get this? We didn't have the internet in its form now that you could just Google it and say this. We didn't have Amazon that you could just push a button and get something here. I remember we built our second roastery and I called my father-in-law in Canada and asked him to send me 5 kilos of screws because I couldn't buy screws.
Wow.
It's from a business perspective, it was fantastic to have that opportunity to have a fresh pasture, a green field. But at the same time, it meant that our business grew very, very organically because it was, you were basically, our competitor was Starbucks, and we thought we had a better product. We liked our product more than Starbucks' product ourselves. So we'd go out and anybody that we could put a coffee into their hand, that would do. So we go to school fairs, markets, anything we can do to say, hey, try our product because we think it's better. And luckily people went, yes, it is. This is what we like.
Yeah. So what is Raw today? Because, people will have been to your place and they'll also have seen your packets of beans and purchased it in many different cafes around Dubai. So are you a roastery and what is the business today?
We're a solution company.
Okay.
Coffee is what we do. Coffee and now beverages. So it's more cafe beverages. But we are primarily now a solution company. So we go in and we solve business owners' problems by providing solutions, and that revolves around a beverage that they typically sell to a customer, which is more back in my field right?
Yeah.
So I used to be an IT solutions specialist. And so having that mentality of what is the business problem that I'm going to solve for my customer is what I love doing. We just happen to use coffee as a medium.
And you have 2 roasteries in UAE?
We have one roastery in Al Quoz.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing. Coffee roasting doesn't actually require a huge amount of equipment. It doesn't actually require a huge amount of space. Where you store your green bean, your raw ingredient, is where you need to have the space. But the actual production and stuff is actually quite simplistic.
Is it labor intensive?
No, it's not. Well, it can be. But now with some very clever people around the world and automation and things like that, we don't have to worry so much about that. I think that if I look at it on paper, my roasting department is the most efficient operation in the whole business.
Amazing.
And the other end of the business, the cafe side of the business is the most labor intensive.
Interesting. Yeah. So what was the journey? How many products or how many types of coffee do you roast now, and how did that go?
Yeah. So we started out really early, with an idea that we would only buy organic coffee. And we've learned, organic coffee is important, but a lot of coffee has an organic label. It's not necessarily organic when you actually get into the detail of it. We had some philosophies. The first one, we like the idea of being sustainable, and sustainable for me is not about having a cellulose cup. Sustainable is about everything, including the sustainability of the business. Am I going to be in business next week? Right? So the first thing we, in this region, which was fantastic, is that we just imparted, our natural New Zealand beliefs of, looking after the environment, looking after your people, looking after your customers. And I think that resonated. We have always, from the first day, been a value add company. Everything that we deal in, I want to add some value to that. I don't want to trade it. I don't want to just buy and sell the same product. And, so for example, we sell a lot of equipment, domestic equipment from Italy, very high-end espresso machines that you can use in your home and things like that. But just giving somebody a machine without actually giving them the training, means that the product that they'll produce won't be as good as it possibly can be. Yeah. Exactly the same as being a coffee supplier. When I say we're a solutions company, I say to customers that the coffee is the 5th or 6th thing that we should discuss. The first thing we need to discuss is your location and what's your business plan? How are you going to be successful as a business? How are you going to be different than the other 3,500 cafes? What's going to attract your customer in? What is your offering? Because the coffee will be one thing, but that's not going to be your sustainable measure in the business. The consumer is not coming just because you have, a single origin Ethiopian 90 score coffee. They might enjoy that, but the reason they're coming there is because you have a business and the way you treat your people and the environment that it is and all the other things about it. So when we looked at that, we thought that initially we would just be supplying residential households, expats, people who had Western style espresso based coffee initially. And then we realized, in fact, actually, it was our first commercial customer was Gordon Ramsay. Oh, wow. Because Gordon had set up down at the Hilton and with Nick and Scott and Victoria and Boyan. And he knew that good coffee at the end of a meal was important. So, local roastery, fresh product, bang, he took that on. And then all of a sudden, all the other cafes started calling us up. And, it became a kind of a bit of a standing thing that people say, oh, you guys are everywhere. It wasn't that we were everywhere. It's just that we had a product that suited what people wanted in their cafes. Yeah.
And it was quite visible, quite distinctive branding and.
Yeah. I mean, you go back and you look at Lime Tree. I remember the first week I arrived in Dubai, nearly 14 years ago, and going onto Beach Road and going to a Lime Tree. And I walked in there and I went, this is like Ponsonby Road in Auckland. This is a cafe in Auckland. I don't want this. I'm in the Middle East now. I want an Arabic thing. Yeah. But what Lime Tree did was groundbreaking. They really introduced a different style of cafe. And then the next big wave was Tom and Serge. And Tom's from Melbourne, he knew the coffee scene, so, all of us were not actually necessarily creating anything new. What we were doing is taking from what we knew from our home countries, and then adapting that to the Middle Eastern market.
Yeah, interesting. But at the moment, like if I'm a commercial or an individual customer, you have quite an array of selection. The menu, as you said, people need to be explained. But if I'm picking a coffee, I've got a lot of choice of different beans. How did that evolve? And, do you source from different parts of the world, and then do you bring the beans in and then do you roast them? And how does that work?
Yeah, so I'm a self-professed coffee geek.
Good.
My wife calls me something else. We went really, really, really deep into the coffee side of it. I'm one of those people that when I get interested in something, I want to know everything about it. So, we use different mediums to actually learn ourselves. At the start, there wasn't a lot of availability of anything online, for example. So we met people in the industry. I'm very, very fortunate to have friends who, are world champions, in the coffee world. And we did the whole understanding the commercial excellence side of the business, how to make the best coffee from that bean, which then, of course, starts you to look at how you roast the coffee. Then we jumped in.
Did you yourself train as a barista?
Yeah. So I've been to the World Championships twice. Wow. I got a 38th and a 3rd. And then actually we had success. We won a World Championship with one of our baristas a few years back, which was good, but it was actually at the point where I realized that wasn't important. By this point we'd realized by starting to go to Origin, 2010, we had our first trip down to Ethiopia, and that changed everything. That changed the way that we looked at things, because immediately we said, okay, what can we do to help these people, right? And that's not about, buying their coffee is important. But what are the things that we can do just as two people, just two Kiwis, what can we do that makes a difference in their world? And we jumped into the fair trade side of things, and we quickly learned that fair trade is not as beneficial to farmers as direct trade. So directly going to your farmer and buying directly from them, because then the middlemen who are not adding value, you can pay that money that you would pay to the farmer. And then also, Kim is an incredible person for being able to identify where there's good and bad in an environment. So she will go into a village and within seconds work out who the person is that she should be engaging with to really get the conversation going. Okay, how do we add value to you? What can we do? Yes, we want to buy your coffee. And I'm the one who's out there just buying coffee. At any one time, we usually have about 40 different coffees. We buy from 16 different countries around the world. And up until COVID, we would spend 2 months a year in coffee worlds, in coffee lands, buying coffees and dealing with people in those environments. That's fantastic for the end consumer. But I feel that our job, and a lot of the time, is to tell the story of the coffee, and that involves the people that farm it. And more today, it's more about the people who produce it. Right? So you'd understand what a producer does, right? So a producer adds value to the initial developer of a product. So we have a lot of farmers that contribute to the coffees that we buy, and then we have very clever producers who add value to those coffees. So how is it processed? What are now we can go very deep on processing of coffee and different flavors that can be generated from coffee. So I'll tell you something, because a lot of people don't understand this. Somebody many, many years ago went and got this cherry off a tree. So think of a cherry like you'd think of as a normal cherry, right? Yeah. So a coffee cherry looks very similar to a coffee cherry. They then worked out that they throw away all that sort of fruit on the outside, and they take these two hard seeds in the middle and they cook them, they crush them, and they add them to water. Now, I think about that and go, how did you get to that point, right? To actually take a fruit and then discard the fruit.
Yeah.
You know, imagine taking an apricot off a tree, cutting the apricot, throwing that away, and just concentrating on the stone.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where
someone figured it out.
Yeah. So now what we've got people and we've got science behind it, and we've got more information, and we've got technologies from other industries. In fact, we're using technologies from the apricot industry today that makes a better quality coffee. So now we're really working that product. Coffee is, they say it's the second largest traded product in the world. It's a little bit of a tagline that, because coffee is a commodity, is traded a lot. I think it might be volume, but it's definitely not value. But coffee is the most consumed, now it's surpassed tea, most consumed legal drug worldwide.
Legal substance, yeah.
Yeah. Because caffeine is a stimulant, or actually it works in your brain in a different way. So,
the second or the most?
It's the most now
after sugar, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think they class it as sugar.
Sugar isn't on its own. Yeah.
Yeah. And the way that caffeine, the main molecule in coffee that actually does the work, it's actually really clever how it actually affects your brain. And how it goes onto receptors, and it actually works like a prophylactic over your receptor. It stops other chemicals getting to your that receptor and telling you to go to sleep.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
It's so now we're starting to understand that. We've got things like cold extracted coffee.
Yeah.
Which this stuff, we call it rocket fuel, but this stuff here, there's 1 milligram of caffeine per mil in that bottle.
Yeah.
Right. So 200 mils, that's too much for the average human to drink.
Yeah.
You got to be a Superman. But, like you have this, and what's really interesting about it, I'm wanting to get some research done at a university level on this, because I believe that the half-life of a cold extracted coffee is double that of a hot extracted coffee for the way it stays in your brain.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're getting where we've gone to now is the technology in our industry is what's pushed the industry, or has made the industry go faster.
Interesting. Okay, jump into the industry, but before we get there, so the business itself, you mentioned you had a partner. It's obviously in mainland. Is that the sort of structure that you've held over the years, and you've kept it like that, or have you looked at?
Yeah. So when I joined Kim, she'd been operating for a couple of years. She was on her second roastery. She'd moved from DIP onto Shakeside Road inside the Dubai Garden Centre, and had a very small operation there. And I met her, and I wasn't working because I'd just moved to Dubai. And there was a university paper that I'd wanted to do in marketing, and part of the paper was that I had to write a business plan for a small business. And I was buying coffee from her, and I said to her, "Hey, can I come and do an interview with you, build a business plan for you?" She said, "Sure." So I did it, and I spent a couple of weeks with her going through and understanding that. And Kim won't mind me saying that. Kim, she's got hundreds of abilities, but running businesses wasn't an ability back then. Like she was doing everything right from a ethical perspective and everything, but from the business structure, there was problems. That was my specialty. So I came and I said, okay, the first thing we have to do is we actually have to make sure that we're sustainable, right? The first thing we have to do is actually get some money coming in the door, because there's too much money going out. And one of the things I said to her first day is, your prices are too cheap. And she said, "Oh, I can't charge anymore." I said, "Well, if you don't, you won't have a business."
You were looking at the margins, and there wasn't any.
I was just looking at what the true cost of doing business, right? I think that, it's really dangerous, when you look at, especially in a business like coffee, where you're buying a commodity product, and you look at the price of that commodity product. And if you don't build a fully loaded cost for that product, you will go bankrupt really quickly,
Because it's interesting that the coffee industry isn't a high margin industry. I think I remember reading that Costa Coffee globally, that Coca-Cola bought, but they run at a 6% operating margin. That's pretty low.
Yeah.
So you really need to be on top of your margins and your costs.
It is a volume game, right? So the coffee business is really is a volume game. And, here we have a different way that people consume, right? So in New Zealand, people will walk down the street drinking a coffee. It's quite surprising you don't see that here.
Not much, no.
No, because people consume coffee here by sitting around a table with somebody else and consuming it. So, where a cafe in New Zealand, you would expect them to be doing 1,000 to 1,500 coffees in a day. Here, a cafe doing more than 500 cups is a high volume cafe.
Interesting.
So that's why the price of a cup of coffee is more expensive here, because we don't sell as many cups by a factor of nearly 3 to other places, even to London, right? One of my favorite little coffee shops in Soho is called Flat White. It used to be owned by some Kiwis, and they were doing with, tiny little place. They would do 1,500 coffees a day. This is 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's walk up, walk out type environment. Here, I think that, we've got a huge cafe roastery in our cause. And, on Saturday, Sunday, we're doing just under 1,000 cups of coffee. So, we're considered to be very, very busy in this world. Most cafes are nowhere near that.
Near that, yeah.
So the margin on the bean side is ridiculously low.
Yeah.
In fact, prices have gone up across the world on average for us by 30%. Since COVID.
The coffee commodity price has gone up. So your margins are squeezed even more.
Well, it has been. We've had to put our prices up. We had no choice. Yeah. And that's 30% at the farm gate, right? So, and that is partly, there's a couple of good things about this. The prices went up because of the cost of production went up, because COVID caused difficulties in actually getting people to do things like pick and prune and do those sorts of things. The cost of transportation internally went up, but mainly I think a lot of my producers, they were quite clever. They took an opportunity to just take a little bit more margin for themselves.
Play into that scarcity thing and
unfortunately, a lot of coffee was left on the trees a couple of years ago because there just wasn't people to harvest. And so that supply and demand causes prices to change. Quality declined. So when you're at my end of the business, which is the premium end of the business, there was much, much less coffee available. And in fact, this season, it's been very challenging to find good quality grades of coffee because there's not a lot available.
The supply is catching up.
Yeah. But a lot of the farmers, if you look at the commercial aspect of coffee production, are at the subsistence level, which is where we don't want them to be. We have relationships that we do trade in a little bit of a different way, where we will pay usually double the going rate and the market rate. So what a lot of people don't understand is that high-end specialty coffee can come from the same tree as a low-end commercial coffee. It's just how that tree is looked after, how it's actually harvested, and then how it's processed determines its value. So, you've got an environment where you've got a farmer who, might want to sell 100 units and the specialty people only want 2. Well, he's still got to sell 98. So how does he get the price up as high as he possibly can? You've got the big companies who consume massive amounts of coffee. They have a requirement that they need minimum of 1 million kilos to produce one product. So, you've got a farmer that might be producing 1,000 kilos a year, and he's got to combine that with a whole bunch of other farmers. So somebody else is telling him what his price is. And often that is below the subsistence level. Typically, a coffee farmer is using that as his cash crop. He will have other crops that is feeding his family and things, but it's a crop that's only produced once a year. So they receive all their income for one part of the year, and then you have a slide over, and in the last 3 months, they are waiting for that crop to be harvested. So
real agriculture industry,
very much so.
But I think, you described that sort of starting off as the cafe part, and then you touched on how you were supplying the Gordon Ramsay and that type of commercial side, and now you also supply solutions not just the F&B product, but you can provide the machines and all that sort of stuff. So does that make your business more robust by having different revenue streams?
Yeah, and look, we were super lucky during COVID.
How so? It sounds like you would have been hit a bit.
Well, we were, day one COVID hit. I mean, I think that the team did an exceptional job of planning. I think we were ahead of the curve. I had a heads up from some friends of mine who were doing business in China to say that there were problems in China and we should be aware of it. In fact, they were jumping on planes and getting out of there. And so we had a plan, and basically
you had a week or two head start at everyone else.
I think we were about a month ahead. We closed down 2 weeks before we were required to. We had 3 plans, and we just chose to enact one plan. But in effect, so at that point, 85% of our business was coming from commercial sales of coffee beans to people who turn that into a cup of coffee that they sell. So that went from, millions a month to zero. We closed the cafe to protect the team. And then we really started focusing. I said, everyone's at home. Okay, how do we get coffee to people at home? Right? How do we get equipment so they can actually make their own coffee at home? And I think in that 4-month period, I think we were selling over 100 coffee machines a month, like 3 coffee machines a day. And these are expensive coffee machines. We're talking $6,000-$7,000 coffee machines. So I don't really like the word pivot, but we changed our focus to who can we get cups of coffee at home to. I got onto radio. I got onto doing a whole bunch of stuff saying we can help you brew coffee at home. The cool thing, apart from all the negative that happened with COVID, is that the consumer's understanding of quality improved dramatically over that period because people are stuck at home. They have to make their own coffee.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're going, oh, hold on, I've got more time. What do I do to make this cup of coffee better? We were doing Zoom training,
Okay.
which, sounds bizarre, but because we know our product, we can tell a customer, okay, so if you change this, it's going to change the flavor. And this is how the grind size or the amount that you put in there or the water temperature or the method that you're using can actually dramatically change the flavor. So we lost all our commercial business. We bought in a bunch of our at-risk team and set up bunk beds in the boardroom to give them a place to actually stay. And then we just focused on that home delivery. And I think we went from doing on average 50 deliveries a day up to one point doing 600 deliveries a day.
Wow.
And
deliveries of coffee or
bags of coffee.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it went from an average delivery of 50 kilos of coffee down to a delivery of 500 grams of coffee. So, the financial side of the business was incredibly difficult.
But it did bounce back quite quickly.
It did. 40% of our commercial customers pre-COVID didn't open again.
That's a big number.
It's a big number.
Yeah.
And, I tried to make myself feel better by going, what? Some of those businesses weren't really sustainable and that the market may have had a oversupply situation. And so now we've got, a better supply demand ratio, and that could be a good thing. Of course, as humans, we don't learn. We immediately tried to fill all those holes that were left by exiting businesses by opening new branches. We did it ourselves. So now we're back to there's an oversupply situation.
We quickly go, yeah.
We do, it's our human nature. But, I think that we were incredibly lucky because we had reserves. We had reserves of coffee stock. I actually had containers of coffee on the water. And some of my competitors ran out of coffee, because they couldn't get it. Timing worked out that
you had the stock. Yeah, it was
had
good.
The stock, and I had cash in the bank. So,
and you were 13 years into the business.
Yeah.
It might have been different. Well, you came through originally raw at the start. There was the global economic crisis in 2008 onwards, but you're more robust as a business. You've got different revenue streams.
Yeah.
And
what saved the business, to be honest, was the cafe in Alcors, right? It's a huge space. It's 13,000 square feet. So we were able to socially distance our tables and still have enough tables that it was nearly viable to be running a cafe restaurant.
Yeah.
So that revenue coming in the door, literally one cup at a time, saved us. And then we're slowly rebuilding back into that now.
Yeah.
I mean, the losses are huge, to be honest. But I think that as a business, from a business leadership perspective, I've learned a lot more. And I think that I'm probably more aggressive in the way that I approach some of the business. And, I have to be honest, we fired a few customers, where we saw that, so COVID had this thing that the world went into a crisis. So we as humans, we looked after humans, and that lasted for a while. And then when you see that you have a different alignment with your customer that doesn't necessarily see that, it's going to be a positive thing if you don't agree with the same set of values, then we actually exited those relationships.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't going to be a positive thing moving forward.
Sounds like you make a lot of decisions that are, to keep things commercially viable, to do things in the best interest of the business and the brand. And like, even with the sustainable things that you're doing at the moment, it sounds like you're really in control of the things that you can be in control of.
Yeah. So we're just we're doing an update to our packaging, right? And the team have been, pushing, saying, listen, we need to be more sustainable. Like, what can we do? And again, I go back to what's a sustainable business, right? So how do we sustain a business? Now, because we put the pressure on ourselves, not just to take the easy route, let's not, 100% compostable packaging would mean that the end consumer has to pay a lot more for my product because it's going to cost me literally 8 times what it's costing me for my current packaging. So is that sustainable? I don't think so, especially in a tightening economy. So I'm pushing the team, and we ended up finding a solution where our new packaging is made from recycled milk bottles. Right? So it's recyclable. It's made of PET. It's not compostable, but we don't have a compostable environment here. So even if I had a compostable product, I couldn't take it through its whole cycle. So I think
these are the bags that the beans come in.
The actual literal bags that the beans go in, and we're talking thousands and thousands of these bags. So we want something to be done with those. We don't want those going into landfill. We want to be able to do something about it, but it's not necessarily the thing that's the top of the Google list that's the best for a business. Sometimes you actually have to challenge yourself, a lot more and say, really, am I doing the right thing? I had a really robust conversation with my finance team the other day, because I don't believe that buying at the lowest cost is good for a business. I think you have to match the cost of the product with the value of that product, So if you've got a better quality, people will pay more for that quality, and the margin, then represents, and you can run a business better.
Interesting. So at the moment, mainly how you're being more sustainable is that packaging.
And we've got rid of plastic.
Originally as well, working with organic farms.
Yeah. But another example is my farmers have sustained COVID. They are still there. They're still producing. They're producing better coffee. The coffees that we've got this year are sensational.
Okay, good.
And it was really hard work. But to me, that's sustainability. You know?
So you link, if it's ESG, you link sustainability with not just like the environment, but you link sustainability with sustainable business and providing good products and an ecosystem around the coffee industry.
Yep. Yeah. And we work, we work down to the level. I don't ever want to tell a coffee farmer how to farm their coffee, but I will find an expert that can help them with their soil management.
Okay.
And then introduce those people together, because I know that at the end of the day, in 2 years' time, the product that I buy from them is going to be better, right? Because it's got the right nutrients, which means that the cherry's grown better and the coffee's going to taste better. Gyanophosphate, Roundup, is insidious through the agricultural industry because it's the easiest way to kill weeds. My coffee producers in Colombia are growing weeds, right? And then they cut those weeds down when they get to a foot tall. They naturally mulch into the soil and they don't have to add nitrates.
Okay.
Right. So, there's ways that we can take the sustainability. I'm lucky because I'm not requiring millions and millions of kilos, right? So I'm not, my coffee farmers can actually act, in smaller lots, and we can see the results of those within a couple of years, if that's thing.
But so just, Matt, because I know you're kind of an expert on this stuff, and, for people who aren't really in the weeds or in the coffee industry, how would you describe the status quo of the coffee industry in Dubai and the UAE now? You've got the commodity side of it. You've got the DMCC. You've got the international brands. We've heard of stories of, PIF looking to invest into Starbucks. You've got the relationship with Costa, with Emirates Leisure. Then you've got a lot of the roasteries, a lot of the funky cool cafes, the homebrew system. You now have startups in coffee, apps, technology, all this sort of stuff. What's the mix at the moment? How do you view it?
It was confused. It's now starting to get clarity. I'm going to make a statement that's going to probably bite me. I'm going to have people who are going to ring me up and say, how do you say that? I think that the UAE is very close to surpassing everywhere else in the world from a coffee industry perspective. Now, I'm going to be very careful how I say that. So for many, many years, Melbourne has been the world leader in coffee because there was a bunch of people who really got into the coffee deeply and understood these little seeds as much as you possibly can. We did it differently in the UAE. We focused on the environment that people go into. So we have more specialty coffee shops here than we do anywhere else in the world per capita.
Wow.
But the coffee itself, people still need to learn more because not every bean is equal. And not every barista or not every machine that makes coffee is going to be as good as possible. But as an industry, we are just about the world leaders now because of the investment that has happened. You have accountants who are driving a lot of businesses, but now we are having people who are going, actually, you know what? The consumer is prepared to pay for that cup, but they are now demanding a higher value. Right. So, if you give me like that Frappuccino, I bought in for you, that product, there is no nasties in that. It's got some sugar in it, but there's no chemicals in that whatsoever. It's whole New Zealand milk, that's been, made into a base that I've added some coffee to it, where, if we're just looking at chemicals and things. So the consumer themselves is going to drive this industry a lot more. And what's been interesting in the last 6 months, a huge amount of companies that are big companies have contacted us to ask us how they improve the quality of their product, which blew me away. I wasn't expecting that at all. And a lot of the time, it's as simple as improving their logistics so that the coffee gets to the barista faster, it's fresher, and therefore it's a better product. So what we're seeing is a globalization rather than, for example, like you mentioned the PIF with the Saudi Coffee Company. Saudi is going to instigate a requirement that coffee is roasted in Saudi. It's a good plan for the country. And so the likes of, the big boys, the Starbucks and Costas are going to have to find a local roastery. Well, that's going to improve the quality immediately because you're going to have a shorter time from roasting till brewing. And that's going to make it better. So the consumer's going to be better off. We're moving away where we want less sugar in our diet. We want less fat in our diet. We want to know where our food has come from, right? So the stories that we're now able to tell about that coffee farmer in Colombia and how they have, got rid of using pesticides and herbicides, and so you're not getting that in your cup is a good story that people want to hear.
But what do you think, maybe your bold statement won't seem as bold in 10 years' time, and if not, and I agree with you, and many people living here might feel it too, but What do you think UAE and Saudi will be known as? If I say Colombia or Ethiopia and we link coffee, we know something. If we say New York or Melbourne, we think of something else. What do you think is it the mix? Is it that the farmers in the Jizan region of Saudi Arabia? Is it the raw coffee company? And is it the mix of everything? Is it the consumers, the diversity in nationalities, or what do you think will make it the leading?
I think what it will be is that, it's not you can buy, if you want to spend the money, you can get the highest quality of anything anywhere in the world today. Right. But what's going to make the difference is that if your core base quality is an improved quality.
Okay.
Right. That's the fundamental thing.
Yeah.
Like, so what the PIF is doing in Jazan is an incredible project. I mean, to be honest, right now, the Jazan coffee is not a very high quality coffee. It needs specialist agronomists to help those farmers improve that quality, which is exactly what the PIF is investing in. They've just signed a lease on 1 million hectares to put in some experimental farms, which is super exciting. But I would say that probably the PIF will probably invest in Colombia and Ethiopia or Brazil in buying farms as well. And they will look at, okay, so, we've got a green unroasted coffee that can be transported in a way that maintains its quality. So when you go to Saudi or you come to the UAE, you can have the world's best coffee. There is the potential because there is enough funding behind it to set up the infrastructure that it's not just one cup. At the moment, you're limited to, maybe you go to a smaller coffee shop or roastery today and they've managed to secure a very small amount of an exceptionally high quality. Well, that's not really sustainable.
Not enough.
DHLing and spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to send a few kilos of coffee, that's exceptional, is not really sustainable.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it doesn't also help the world. So how do we generally lift the whole quality thing? And I think that this region will be known for adding that value, to creating the consumer demand. We need to move the consumer away, in my opinion, from sugar and milk in our coffee, because that is two things that can hide quality, and it can also hide badness.
Yeah.
So, if sugar and milk wasn't available, coffee consumption would drop considerably because the taste profile of bad coffee would be so obvious that people wouldn't drink it.
That's a different way of looking at it. Yeah. So just two quick questions, or long questions before we finish, but different. I guess, when you were talking at the beginning, it was unusual to hear the story of how you led with manufacturing. And, we speak to a lot of startups, we speak to a lot of different industries, and the UAE, even in startups, people outsource their engineers. In retail, they get their products made elsewhere. Automotive, obviously, there's no automotive maker in the UAE. So what you've done is you've put manufacturing into the UAE and made the margins work. That's rare, right? So, are you conscious of that? And do you think that, that is a blueprint or a roadmap for food and F&B industry in the future in the region?
Absolutely. Look, so I remember calling home 14 years ago and going, you can get McDonald's delivered. People, what do you mean you get delivered? We're used to having anything delivered. I think that you look at what's happened with our food delivery service, with our dark kitchens, and what we do. I mean, I would say we're the world leaders in doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I think what will actually happen is that there will be a lot more focus on where is the value that can be added, right? So the value today is in brands and the products that they do. It's not necessarily in how you produce it. What we don't want to have is homogenized product. So we don't want everything to be the same, just with a different packaging, right? So there's a danger area if you go into mass production of these things. But also, again, it's ridiculous the amount of importation that we're doing of product. We don't need to do this. Have you had tomatoes from Sharjah? Have you had mushrooms from Sharjah? We're producing products here that are world class. and we don't need to be flying things in, every week just to satisfy the fact that we've got strawberries year round. We don't need to do this. We can produce these locally.
Interesting.
The consumer is allowed to demand these sort of things, but maybe we need to change our mentality a little bit to be a little bit seasonal. Maybe we need to think, really, do I need to be able to get this all year round, or should I get excited for mango season like we used to do?
Interesting. Probably we're going to remain global, but I hear you on the manufacturing locally. I think it's super important across industries.
Yeah, and I think that that manufacturing has been here. If you look at some of the manufacturing plants, we have some of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturing in RAC is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, ceramic manufacturing, so we've had that industry has been here for many, many, many years. I think that there's going to be a version of it which has a little bit more of a niche play to it, where the consumer is going to really enjoy that. New Zealand is like a bunch of villages, right? So you in my, where I was living before, I had a greengrocer, I had a butcher, I had a bakery, I had a pharmacy, I had all those individually run industries. Yeah, we had a supermarket, but you'd go to the butcher and the baker and the greengrocer, and then you'd go and buy your cans of goods at the supermarket. Okay. I think that is a way better model, for the world, and to do it that way. And I think that the consumer ends up with a better product, because you're talking directly to the person who's responsible for producing your food, and that's a good thing,
So can you order directly on a Raw app?
So we do huge amount of delivery, but we can do a huge amount of support, right? So, coffee is one of these really cool things that, I have over 40 different coffees and they're very, very different. So if you like a coffee in a certain way, have a conversation with us and we can help you find a good coffee. If you want to switch from a cappuccino to an espresso, we can also help you on that journey as well.
Brilliant. I'm conscious of time, but Matt, you've been here for 15 years or so. Raw coffee has been around for the last time. You're passionate about coffee, obviously. Are you as passionate about the region and the industry, and what does the future look like for Raw?
I had a conversation with my father about 2 weeks ago, and the conversation that I had with him is that I think that this region is going to be the best region for the next 5 years to live, work and play. I really do believe that we have all the ingredients to be able to do things. And, we are seeing more people coming in here with this entrepreneurial spirit that they're wanting to add value. We're finally able to get back to that community-ness. Now we can actually see each other. We can actually become a community, and we're seeing more and more people caring about people. And so that's what makes Dubai and this region super, super cool. We've got infrastructure, we've got everything you'd need to be here. It's the streets aren't paved with gold bars. It's hard. You have to work, to do here, but you're safe. The education systems here are the best in the world if you want to bring your kids up here, as I did. So everything that we've got going on in Dubai and the UAE at the moment is fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to the next 5 years or so.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for sharing all that. You've really opened our ears and eyes to the coffee industry, and congratulations on what you've achieved with Raw and your business partner. And we'll follow the story in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really good chat with Matt today. Really enjoyed hearing about Raw, and you can tell the passion and the knowledge he has about the coffee industry. So I think anyone interested in coffee would have learned a lot today, and then hopefully about Dubai as well and the industry here. So I'd like to thank Shahir, our producer, for putting the show together, and Ali as well for doing all the production on the episode. we'll be back next week with another episode. Please do subscribe on smashy.tv to watch any of the previous episodes. And if you're listening on any of the podcasts, do recommend, leave a rating or share it with a friend. And yeah, have a good weekend.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.